we both talked about the rhythm and the guitar at the beginning, but speaking of rhythm, between Stuart Copeland, Omar Hakim, Vinnie Colaiuta, Abe Laboriel, Josh Freese, has there ever been anyone more spoiled in the drumming department than Sting? I mean, would he even know how to play with an average drummer?
And also Keith Carlock too.
Yeah, Keith
Yeah.
Carlock. I've seen him in concert with Steely Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, he's earned it. I mean, he's great himself, so he warrants it, and all the great people want to play with him. But just look at all the, you look at all the drummers he's worked with, and most of us would be happy. In your own case, you have played with a lot of great drummers, but, Michael Urbano. Let's throw in a plug for Michael Urbano. We love Michael Urbano. It's just so funny when you see Sting start out with Stuart Copeland. I think like Rusty Anderson had said when he was here, he was like the John Bonham of the 80s. He was like the drummer's drummer everybody looked to. And Sting, then he goes to Omar Hakim next, and then just goes on. And it's just funny to me. I can't even be envious of it because Sting's such a great, bass player. It's warranted, but it's like, good grief. It's like a who's who in drummers. So what I was wondering was, and you kind of answered this. First, I thought, well, maybe Dominic did all the guitars on the 6 songs. He doesn't have a writing credit on all of it. But with you both being guitar players, and would there be 4? I figured, well, Lyle did the guitar on these 4, and Dominic the other 6. That's not the case. It's all kind of mixed up, it sounds like.
Yeah, on the 4 songs that I'm credited as guitar and co-writer, those all happened in the room together.
Okay, good.
We recorded all those together. It wasn't like I came in after Dominic recorded his parts or vice versa.
Gotcha.
They all happened together. I still do sessions, still do record dates, and my favorite is when that's the scenario when everybody's playing at once. It's the most fun.
Yeah, and that used to be literally the only way it could be done,
Yeah.
Even the Beatles' first album, I think they just all played live together. And if anything was overdubbed on that, there wasn't much. And that's 1963 or 62 or 3. So, yeah, I want to talk through some of these other songs because another one you have a writing credit on is a song called Pretty Young Soldier. Not Pretty Young Soldier, but Pretty Young Soldier. That one has an interesting story because, it's about 2 lovers, and the male joins the army and goes off. So in order to be close to him, his girlfriend poses as a male and joins the army too. That's the Pretty Young Soldier. And then an officer finds himself strangely attracted to her and then finds out why. So my question on that would be, I'm wondering if that's a true story or not. I mean, Sting is an imaginative and creative guy, but that kind of sounds like, what was the Barbra Streisand thing? Yentl. It sounds kind of like, could it be based on a true story? So I have to look into that a little bit
I have
more.
no idea. That song has a little bit different story in terms of how it was started. That intro, actually, the verse, it's 4 chords. It's D, A minor, C, G. That was a progression that I would record, that I would play into my looper, and I would just kind of warm up and practice and solo over those 3 chords. It's like a 6/8 kind of feel. And so that was something I had in my back pocket that I've always just kind of goofed around with, just as a practicing aid. So I started playing it at while we were writing, just in a lull, and we just started all playing it together, and that's what became of that. We just took that idea and expanded on it, and all put our heads together, and that's what that song is.
That's cool.
There's a little bit more of me in that track as a result of that. There's something I'd had for years.
Yeah.
Just a little germ of an idea.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, Tom Sawyer by Rush was something they used to play at sound check.
Wow.
I don't know if it was the dun the dun the dun the dun the dun the dun, or the nino 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 nino. One of those things was just kind of like a sound check jam that became a song. I might have that wrong.
Probably the neener neener part.
The neener neener. That's probably exactly what they were going for. Can you make that sound more like neener neener? Well, let's see. A couple months before the album was released, track 1, "I Can't Stop Thinking About You," was released as a single. And the unusual thing about that one is the backing harmonies. On a lot of the Police stuff, Sting did all of his own harmonies, and part of their sound was him harmonizing with himself. It's credited Jerry, Diego, and Derek from the Last Bandoleros as the backing vocalist. So, as you say, he's like trying different things. It's more of a traditional oohs and ahs that you'd hear on anybody else's album. That's what stands out to me. And, I understand why that was released as a single because it's high energy level with a pretty simple, straightforward message. There's another, tight pop song on there called Down, Down, Down. If I hadn't seen the track listing ahead of time, I would assume that song was called Here Comes the Sound because he uses that phrase about 10 times in the song. It's one of those either ors, when you're
Yeah.
titling something, you go, both of these will work. There's plenty of down in there too. Let's see. Yeah, heading south on the Great North Road. This is a departure. It's more of a traditional old school Celtic. He has like a Celtic accent instead of his usual sort of faux Jamaican. Very stripped down, bare bones acoustic recording. Very different from the rest of the album. So I'm guessing this was something done after you were like your part was over.
I had nothing to do with that track.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a nice track.
it is. If you can't love me, a breakup song, or actually it's like a shape up or ship out kind of song. It's like get your act together or leave. There's that one. There's a song in there about refugees. How timely is that?
Awesome.
Called Inshallah, an Arabic word meaning if God wills it. The interesting thing about that recording is most of what you hear on there, the vocals and most of the instruments are slow, but there's some percussion in there that's double time, and it's more active and busier than everything else. You wouldn't expect that part to be in there, and it does create an interesting tension. And let's face it, if you're a refugee, you're bound to experience a great deal of tension. So that's apropos to the subject matter. See, the last track on the album is also very spare. It's an acoustic recording called The Empty Chair, told from the perspective of a kidnapped journalist imprisoned and thinking about his loved ones back home. Sting has gone to this territory before on Nothing Like the Sun, and then even some police tracks, Driven to Tears. The stuff we don't want to have to think about or face, but again, very topical and current. I think it's specifically about James Foley. But as I mentioned before, I love the fact that a guy who released his first album in like 1978, first Police album, almost 40 years later, he's still releasing material that's this good and this relevant. He might take a twist and turn to the lute, or he might take a twist and turn to the orchestra, or even this thing now, try and do something different, to keep challenging himself. But another thing we spoke about last time you were here was your solo albums, Purple Passages, Tabula Rasa, and Harmonic Crusader. And I realize the solo stuff is a little more boutique and specialized and harder to fund and harder to sell and everything. But the thing about that is I don't care because that's what I want to hear. So you owe it to me personally to produce your fourth solo album. Sooner the better. No, but seriously, do you have another solo album on the drawing board, or do you find are you finding this other work satisfying and fulfilling and hopefully lucrative enough to sort of squelch that need, or in the back of mind, are you always thinking about another solo album?
Yeah, the latter. I'm always thinking about another record. Um, but as a working musician who works when people call me and ask me to provide a service, that's my priority, especially
Yeah.
having family and
Mm-hmm.
bills and whatnot. So I tend to work on that material when I don't have other paying work. And so that's why it's taken me so long to start another one. Is just I just keep working. And I've started a few things. I've had some time I'm excited about. I'm very excited about it. I have an orchestral type music I want to do with guitar and orchestra. And, yeah, actually guitar, keyboards, drums, orchestra, or strings. So I've actually started a few things, but it's just going to take a lot of time to finish it. And it's hard to have 3 months uninterrupted to where I can focus on it.
I also want to be the little voice that reminds you, just like I remind you, it's been 5 years since you've been on the podcast. I want to remind you that that was about the time Harmonic Crusader came out. So
Yeah.
I'm saying I know I'm not the only person listening right now who feels that way. That we like listening to you support other artists like Sting. We like hearing all your great film scores, but your solo work remains our favorite stuff. Uh,
Thanks. Appreciate
yeah,
it. The thing that's why I'm extra excited about doing it is that in the time I've written so much music between the time I finished my last record and now, um, and I've done all kinds of music and worked with all kinds of people, different styles. My last movie, I had a 70-piece orchestra,
mm,
and I've just learned a lot, and I want to be able to incorporate that into my music. And I've grown as a musician and matured in certain elements of my musicianship. And you want to bring that, you bring that into your music, and it'd be fun to bring that into my own music and sort of share that. So I'm hoping I have more free time, quite literally free time.
Yeah,
uh,
gotcha.
so I can commit to getting some of it finished.
I understand all that. I'm just making sure you know that because I mean I have a friend in Germany who learned about you. He kind of knew bourgeois tag stuff, but he learned about your solo stuff from your appearance on this podcast and became a huge fan of it and bought it all. And I told him earlier today that you were coming on the show again, and he's there's a market out there for that stuff. But keep in mind, our generation came up with the expectation of an album being 40 to 45 minutes and 10 to 12 tracks. Put out 4 tracks, put out 6 tracks, put out a ripping
Yeah,
single.
that's exactly right. I mean, I it's something to consider
Yeah.
to doing, and I might have to do that just so that there's material that that's out there.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I really appreciate that, and it's funny because I have people that want to interview me like yourself, um, and I'm always curious about what they want to talk about because I have this weird sort of three-headed, four-headed, five-headed life, in terms of am I the guy that is a session guy, or am I the sort of progressive rock, jazzy rock guy that puts instrumental records out, or do people want to talk about Frank Black, with the Pixies, because I spent 5 years with him,
Jellyfish.
or Jellyfish. Some people know me through that. So I'm always curious of like how people, how do they come to me through which of all of those completely different worlds were they introduced to me? And I've just been a fan of all kinds of music, and wanted to play all kinds of things, and it's afforded me a great variety of experiences.
Well, one thing I think of when I listen to the score you did for Love and all your scores is because you're such an expert guitar player. Any style of guitar or any tone or anything it needs, you just can bring it up. I know other film composers who are not guitarists at all, or certainly not at your level. So then they have to hire somebody. So if they want to try some of the things you do, like you said, you might try 5, 6, 7, 8 different things and then decide what you like. They have to go hire a guy to try those 5, 6, 7, 8 things to arrive at point, E. And so that seems like would be kind of an advantage for you. But your scores don't necessarily sound guitar heavy. There's plenty of guitar in them, but we've heard accordion today, and I've heard flute in there, and horns and whatever else it takes, because of course, and strings obviously. So percussion, interesting percussion on this show you just did. So
Yeah.
plenty of good stuff. Well, before we get to our last track, which is going to be your other writing credit on the Sting album, when I was doing my exhaustive research for this, I heard you tell a story on another podcast, and it reminded me of a similar experience I had. So I want to quickly tell my story first, and then have you recount yours. And hopefully, when I tell my story, you'll know what I'm talking about. And if not, I'll remind you. But a few years ago, either as a Mother's Day present or a Christmas present, I can't remember which, my brother and I took our mother to the San Francisco Symphony to hear a performance of Baroque music, which is her favorite kind of music. And there were these two sort of crotchety ladies sitting at the end of the row. They acted a bit put out that they had to stand up to let us pass them to get to our seats. They're kind of grumbling about how we were inconveniencing them. So my mother, of course, took an instant dislike to them. So they're making the announcement for everybody: turn off your phones, please settle in. 'Cause it's classical music. You know what that environment's like. And so we arrive at that moment. Imagine a huge symphony hall where the conductor is just about to set off the orchestra. And at that moment, the lady sitting next to me, right next to me, apparently in an effort to turn off her phone, accidentally turns it on. So in that reverent moment of silence, the room is pregnant with anticipation. The entire audience hears, this one of those innocuous factory setting phone sounds, and in the whole entire hall, she's sitting right next to me. So in certain circumstances, an audience would be annoyed by that. But the timing of it was just so perfect. Everybody's ready to hear this great orchestra. Instead, they hear the stupidest, little dumbest thing way in the distance from their point of view. The crowd laughed. And even the conductor and the orchestra seemed to find it funny. You know, they're about to play this brilliant music, and everybody hears this off in the distance. And of course, the lady's flustered, and she had probably turned it off. And then, oh, I better check. And that was the wrong moment to do it. So of course, all heads are going to turn to find the source of this disturbance. For all they know, I mean, same thing happened. I was at a comedy club. Some guy sitting next to me yelled out. He heckled something. All heads turned. They don't know if it was me or him because I'm sitting right next to him. My mother kind of enjoyed that because, she saw it as poetic justice and a dose of karma that these crotchety ladies should be subjected to a little dose of embarrassment because of how they treated us when we got there. But I'm wondering, after I told you that, if you know the story that I'm going to ask you to tell.
Is it the Narda Michael Walden drum clinic?
Hello, ding, ding, ding. That's it. Let's hear it.
I just recanted that story just yesterday to a friend of mine.
It's awesome.
Oh, you want me to tell the story again?
Yeah, man, I set you up. Let's hear it. My listeners don't know it.
Well, this is a long time ago. This is in probably the early '80s. Narda Michael Walden, great drummer, producer, songwriter. Played with the Mahavishnu Orchestra when he was in his early 20s, and wrote much of the Czech Beck record Wired, where he also plays drums and some keys. And then, started doing his own solo work and more R&B material. He produced Aretha Franklin's Freeway of Love and Whitney Houston, and he went on to be a big producer, pop records, R&B. Anyway, so in the early 80s, he was invited to give a drum clinic at Guitar Showcase in San Jose. And I was at this clinic with a bunch of kids, young people that were interested in seeing him play and talk about his drumming. And there's a bunch of us sitting on the floor cross-legged, and there's a drum set up, but there's also, a band. He was going to perform with a band as well. And so he was announced, and he got on his drum set, and he was wearing it at that time, and he was a disciple of the Indian guru Sri Shimnoy. So he was wearing this kind of white, what are those called? Tunics? Is that what they're called? You know what I'm talking about, Dan?
Yeah, I know what you mean, though. Some kind of like robe type of sort of reverent religious kind of garb.
Yeah, and he's got a white drum set with roses on it, and he looks as if he walks to his drums and he's got his eyes closed. It looks like he's been meditating in the bathroom for like 3 hours. He's like in total bliss. He's kind of feeling around for his drums, and everyone's sitting on the floor just like spellbound, just watching him get up on the riser and sit down, and everyone's just like completely dead silent because they're like, whoa, check this guy out, man. And you could hear a pin drop, and then suddenly from the back of the room we all hear, "What kind of sticks do you use?"
I love it. Same thing, man. That reverent moment where everybody's waiting for something great to happen. What kind of sticks do you?
Yeah, I mean, everybody laughed.
I can picture because everybody's been waiting for this. What kind of an idiot does that?
It really sounds like someone who was taking the moment to be funny.
I gotta believe that. I mean, the lady with me at the Symphony Hall was an accident. It seems like somebody was reading the room and thought this would be funny. I'll just do this.
Because it was, it was there couldn't have been a more wrong time to blurt that out in dead silence. And plus not only that is that it's just probably the most stupid question you could ask any drummer. Like the most unimportant question you can ask drummers, like what sticks do you use?
Right. If I just knew what kind of sticks Billy Cobham played with, I'd be as good as Billy Cobham. I feel sorry for him, the drummer himself, because he, as you said, he was in a frame of mind. He was like
probably didn't even hear it. He was in some sort of interplanetary void.
He tuned it out. But when I heard you telling that story, I'd kind of forgotten about the Symphony Hall. Oh man. The wrong thing hit the wrong time for sure. Well, we spoke about three of your songwriting contributions to Sting's album. The song we're going out with is your fourth contribution, a really rocked out number called Petrol Head. You know, who threw out that riff in the little garage setting?
That was Dominic. That's Dominic's riff, that kind of angular riff that starts the track. It was a nice meal of a riff, and so I contributed with just a bunch of crazy, weird guitar sounds with my effects. And that was my contribution mostly to that track. But again, it was another one we just sort of hashed out. Actually, no, that track, that was another one of those, another track that they had, as a three-piece, had worked on prior to me being involved. And so it was just brought up while we were writing, and I contributed my bits and pieces, and we recorded it.
Well, I know this is his new one. We're all supposed to sit on it and enjoy it for now, and we will. But it does make me wonder what he's going to do next. Maybe he'll do like a loot garage band. I don't know. But yeah, whatever his idea was in mind for this experiment, it clearly worked because it does have energy and it does have relevant lyrics, as we discussed. And it does have great playing on it, and it sounds fresh. And I remember, I don't want to say by name. I mean, I followed his solo career for quite a while and sort of went into a little area where I kind of lost track of him. There was one or two of his that I kind of, let's say, quote unquote, didn't like as much as an earlier album. I'll just leave it at that. This one I heard, I go, oh man, this is music I'm going to want to listen to more than once. And this is something I'm going to be in the mood for. And of course, the connection with you being in it too is, it's cool. I'm glad you came on to talk about it because now the listeners of that album will have some insight into how it all came together that they wouldn't have otherwise. And I know a lot of listeners are hearing these tracks for the first time. So let's recap here. Sting, 57th and 9th, Love. Hey, if you can even find it, go watch Bad Teacher.
Yeah, I got a couple new things to talk about. I mean, real quickly, I'll just mention them quickly.
Please do.
Before you kick me off the air.
Yeah, that's what I do to the guests. I kick them off before they can plug their upcoming stuff. No, go for it.
Yeah, there's a show called Crashing for HBO. Pete Holmes is kind of the star of that. And then I have another show on the CMT network called Sun Records, which is about Sam Phillips.
So these are both TV series.
Yep.
So you've gone from the guy who scored films to the guy who's got 4 TV series under his belt. Well, as we said, it's been 5 years since we spoke. But it's interesting that you went off in that direction. So that tells me 2 things. It tells me you like doing that kind of work and that people want to hire you for that kind of work. But as you said, you're still doing any film projects coming up?
Well, the last one I had, it was Bad Santa 2. I did that one. That was out during the Christmas time, late 2016.
Was there a film 21 and over? Did you do a film called 21? Yeah.
I did. Mm-hmm.
So what I was going to say is if people go to lyleworkman.com, there's a lot of info there because you said you wear so many hats and do so many things. I find it an excellent resource. There's all kinds of cool stuff there.
Sadly, need of an update. There's just some records on my discography that I don't think I have there. I did a Sarah McLachlan record, and then I did another Michael Bublé. I've done about 3 Michael Bublé records as a session player. I don't know if those are on there. Oh, and also a very interesting project coming out. It's Bob Marley's 40th anniversary of the Exodus record.
Oh, wow. Classic album.
I was hired to recut some of those iconic songs produced by his son Ziggy, whose last record I also played on, or his last few records, and I think we'll see if he gets another Grammy nomination. He does almost every year and wins. But I've done records with Ziggy, and then he produces Bob Marley Exodus 40th anniversary thing, and it was playing those songs to Bob's vocal, his original vocal, Mr. Marley's vocal, which was an incredible treat and honor. So, some cool things coming out.
Great, man. I'm glad you mentioned that stuff. I usually know, Jennifer Batten came on, and I was about to say goodbye to her, and she said, well, I have an instructional DVD coming out.
Yeah.
But I couldn't have known about that. It wasn't really known yet. But as I told everybody, go to lyleworkman.com, and making this public gives you an incentive to go back and update it with all this stuff.
Yeah, I do too.
Oh, good. Well, Lyle, on behalf of my listeners and myself, I want to thank you for taking the time yet again to hang out with us for a while. As always, it's been a lot of fun.
Well, I appreciate you're interested in talking to me about this. It's most of the time I spend in my studio looking at a computer screen with music all around me. I'm sitting in my studio now, and it's, you know, a composer's life is often very isolated. So a lot of time, the more major proportion of the year, I'm working in myself. Now I do bring in players, so that's fun.
Yeah.
But if I'm not playing out, it's really great to hear that the music is being listened to in the projects I work on. So I really appreciate you doing that and taking note of that. Thank you, Dan.
Well, I'm glad you're able to get out of the Batcave and go do Bowie tributes now and then and play on the Sting album. And,
Yeah.
you know, we're not crying too much for you, Lyle.
I hope that doesn't sound like I was thinking.
And I'm sure that the wife and kids like having you in a home studio and have access to you.
Yeah, it's a great setup. I'm extremely lucky and blessed.
I also want to thank our friend Tom Bowers for engineering and editing this podcast. And don't forget to be on the lookout for season 2 of the Netflix original series Love, March 10th, 2017. So as I said, from 57th and 9th, we're going to listen to Sting, Lyle Workman, and Friends. This is a fiery little track called Petrolhead. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next time. So long, everybody.
Chariot